just do, babe. I never see you anymore. I need your love, babe. Well, ooh, that's all I'm living for. Ooh, I didn't wanna pressure you, baby. Sing it, y'all. Wanna be your, yeah. Wanna be the only one that makes you come. I wanna be your. Turn you on, I know make you shine.
Eeryk and Simon.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Eeryk and Simon Show. Wonderful that you could join us all this evening. We are going out live on X, Rumble, YouTube, Instagram, Owncar, Substack, Twitch, and Icecast on the kids' channels and on mine. Good evening, young Eeryk McRae. How the devil are you?
How the devil? Well, I hope not too much devil. No, I'm doing very well, Simon. Got a haircut, so that makes you always feel a little bit younger.
Yeah, you're looking sharp. And in point of fact, you're actually doing kind of like the floating head routine.
A little bit, yeah, a little bit. I just got a little bit of white up here and a little yellow down here. Everything else is black as day. So.
All right, awesome. I've been meaning to ask you, how's that this fancy new machine build of yours coming along? I see that you're buying hardware and putting together the super duper broadcast / gaming system.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's coming along in the sense that I've got a motherboard sitting in the corner, doing nothing until I have money. But yeah, no, it's coming along. I know exactly what I need to get, what I want to get, and when it's all done, it's going to make all of this stuff a million times easier.
Right, fantastic. So you've got a GPU in mind. You know how much, what CPU you want, all that sort of good stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, GPU's already sorted, but yeah, all the other stuff, got it all in mind. Just need to find the time to, put the money in place to pick it up. So.
All right, very good. Now, I have a surprise for the kid, everyone. But before I do, I'll say good evening to a few people. I see Shelley the Kiwi is here. Fantastic, talking about spraying the bugs. Yeah, I've got an issue. Like, I keep my ranch sliders open to keep the room a little bit cooler. But the problem is I've just been getting nailed by mosquitoes throughout the broadcasts. Tuakahu Rangi is here. Good evening. Nice to see you, young fella. And so is my old friend PLJ. Knob Oddie is here. Haven't seen Knob Oddie for a while. Guys, you might recall with the thing with him, that he came on live to tell us about it the night that it happened, which is pretty cool. Isha Aware New Zealand is here. Fantastic. All right, wonderful to see some of the regulars. Oh, and of course 69420 big. All right, in terms of the surprise that I have for the kid and for all of you, hello Helsinki. Believe it or not, tonight we are being simulcast on radio in Finland. I shit you not. We are going out live to Resonate Radio in Helsinki.
Hi. Hopefully you can understand our ridiculous accents, Helsinki.
So how crazy is this? So our chap Scott, who you often see in the chat, is setting up. He does this professionally. He builds radio stations, builds a whole bunch of radio and television type broadcasting studios and things like that. He's setting up a new radio station. He hit me up midweek and said, "Look, I'm building this new one called Resonate Radio. Do you want to send a stream?" I said, "Yep, love to." With the intention that I do the occasional live DJ set on my turntables. But he hit me up today and said, "Look, if you guys are doing an episode, would love to do the audio." So hello everyone who's listening in Finland. Hello Helsinki. You are listening to Auckland, New Zealand, and we are very pleased that you are tuning in to listen to my nonsense and the kids' wisdom. Getting into that real quick, I wanted to bring up the kids' first article. Here we go. This comes to us from News Talk ZB. Take it away, Eeryk.
It comes from, it should be Bassett, Brash and Hyde, should it not? And it is Rodney Hyde.
Oh, sorry, I've brought up the wrong article. Sorry, you guys. One moment, kid. Let me... looks like I missed that one. Hold up.
If you like, I can start with the News Talk ZB article. That's more than happy with that.
No, it's all good. Let me bring it up. Hold up. There we go. Sorry about that, Eeryk. Yeah, Rodney Hyde. Yep, got it now.
Yep. So, Rodney Hyde, schooling through a Te Ao Māori lens. Last week, my 13-year-old at Wakatipu High studied in English, an introduction to culture and identity in literature. The class guide was as follows. Below are some links helpful to discuss that may be useful for understanding the why when it comes to teaching and learning about all things culture and identity through a Te Ao Māori lens. Take some time to view one or two of these. One of the links to study was the YouTube clip, How Colonizers Went from Learning Te Reo Māori to Trying to Exterminate It. Ironically, the clip for her English class is in Māori with subtitles. The 5-minute clip is also a bit stronger than the title implies. University of Victoria sociolinguist Dr. Vinnie Olsen Reader states, once the Pākehā government was established here, from there the desire grew to exterminate the Māori people. It wasn't just the Māori language that the government wanted to exterminate, but the Māori people themselves, Dr. Olsen Reader claims. Dr. Olsen Reader claims that New Zealand government was genocidal, that it wanted to kill off all Māori. He offers not one shred of evidence in support of his extraordinary claim. But remember, this is English class. It might be expected that students would have the opportunity to question such a claim, but you would be wrong. The purpose was to see the world through a te ao Māori lens. The genocidal claims must be accepted. To do otherwise would be to see the world through the colonizer's lens, which is beep wrong. The task instead is to analyze the mood and tone of the video. Mood and tone are crucial aspects of text, and we must understand their role in creating meaning for readers. What is mood in film and literature, and who does it, and all of this stuff. The propaganda achievement is extraordinary. History is upended and inverted. Māori are Holocaust victims. Pākehā are violent Nazi oppressors and don't dare question the narrative. The narrative can't be questioned because not to question is the very point of the exercise. Students are to see the world through their te ao Māori lens. Brilliant. And all the more so that this is achieved in English. The purpose is not to teach but to indoctrinate. No more the learning of grammar, punctuation, syntax, or great literature. Our children don't know Wuthering Heights or Shakespeare, but they know Western bad, Indigenous good. They are helped along in the video with MP Rawiri Waititi weighing in. We were taught everything we were doing was bad, and everything that they were doing was good. The white was right. Any great piece of literature or great movie clip could be used to study mood and tone. But the critical theorists at the Ministry of Education take every opportunity to indoctrinate our children. No subject is safe. The teacher involved is excellent, but this is what she must do. The fault lies with the Ministry of Education prescribing such rubbish, and with the Honourable Eeryk Stanford and Prime Minister Christopher Luxon for overseeing it. We have a supposedly conservative-led government that sees nothing wrong with critical theorists tearing down our Judeo-Christian heritage from within the education system. Indeed, the minister is steeped in critical theory. She can't argue it or defend it, but she doesn't need to. She has power. That is all that counts. And so death to the oppressors, and up with the oppressed. Ms. Stanford has a bachelor's with honours from the Auckland University. She majored in political science and minored in Māori studies. Now that is an interesting point. I did not know that.
That is, I didn't know that. Okay, yeah, all right. Well, that is clear indoctrination, and I see some of our Maori friends in the comments are having a laugh at that, because it just simply doesn't reflect their views, and I would go so far as to say that it's the sort of critical race nonsense that comes out of American universities and is promulgated by corrupt critical race theorists inside the Ministry of Education, but that most people in New Zealand just don't buy into. I think that most people know that this is just complete and utter nonsense.
What I found interesting, though, is that they are using this whole try and view it all through a te ao Māori lens, but the actual intention, the actual task is to assess the mood and tone and to view this from a almost like a film study type thing. And so it's like they're bringing in this subject and basically just manufacturing utter nonsense that has no basis in reality whatsoever, and then kind of disguising that and preventing you from actually questioning it, because questioning it has nothing to do with the actual intention of the lesson, or the claimed intention of the lesson, which is to assess the mood and tone for crucial aspects of text, and we must understand their role in creating meanings for readers. What the mood in film and literature does when examining a text, and all this weird stuff that it's put there to try and hide the fact that they are indeed just trying to indoctrinate your children in English class with some of the most disgusting revisionist history I've ever seen in my life.
I saw a video clip of Rodney today. Did you catch that? Did you catch him outside the school board meeting?
No, I didn't know.
Okay, so what's happened is like if you read Bassett, Brash and Hyde blog, you should. It's fantastic. It's one of the best blogs in New Zealand because of the preeminence of the three individuals who run it, who are senior politicians and have made major contributions over the decades to New Zealand public life. Well, he's been documenting the sex indoctrination which is going on at the school because he's got a 13-year-old daughter there, and he wanted to give a presentation which the school governance board doesn't want him to give, and he's been trying for about a year, and they finally agreed to listen to his submission. This is the board of trustees at that school, but wouldn't let him film it. So he actually went and checked with the Ministry of Education whether or not he was entitled to film his presentation to that school board, and they said, of course, it's a public meeting, everyone is. And the school board has pulled out every trick in the book to stop that from being filmed. And he released a video about this today that he filmed outside it, saying, look, this is my right and it's being denied to me, and it's simply because this board of trustees wants to indoctrinate children into rainbow ideology, and they are preventing any publication of that from coming out. So good on him, Mr. Hyde. I think he does. I think he's doing some wonderful work exposing all of this stuff.
100%. And I do have a couple people in the chat here. Firstly, Jackson Fowler, who said he's joined for the first time. Thank you very much, Jackson, for tuning in. But Harold Demure says, did not know that about Eeryk Stanford and the CRT nonsense. And it's not just English class either, where this kind of indoctrination is happening. Well, the thing is, if it's happening in English class, it can happen in any class. It's probably happening in PE, for goodness sake. They probably have a sit down and say, hey, remember, guys, the reason the Māori boys are picked first on the rugby team is because they are genetically superior. Rawiri Waititi said so. So, yes.
Yeah, there is that sort of stuff, and the education department knows all about it. And Tim O'Connor's an old friend of mine. We went to school together. These days, he's the headmaster at Auckland Grammar. I heard him being interviewed on this particular topic maybe 18 months, 2 years ago, I think on News Talk ZB, and he made the point that we could do without that we could just get rid of the Ministry of Education altogether, and most of the schools want that. He said, look, there are 4,000 people employed by the Ministry of Education. We could get rid of all of them, shutter that whole department, save the taxpayer all of that money, including those 4,000 people's salaries, and improve education in this country. And I thought that was really, really fascinating. And one of the other points that I've heard made is that they know that things like RSE, that parents can pull their kids out of those classes. So what they do to circumvent that, and this is the critical race theorists inside our Ministry of Education, what they do is they insert RSE into the general curriculum in other subjects like this, right? So that you're getting critical race theory, RSE education, things like that, and completely unrelated subjects like English. All right, I have some comments from my people as well. Joel is here in the chat. Good evening. Lovely to see you too. Shortland Chambers is here. He's a young man for 50. I've got to tell you, like, I've met Shortland Chambers in person. Geez, you'd never pick that young guy is 50 years old. Guys, as I say, it is wonderful that everyone is joining us. Do say hello in the chat. I know we have a whole bunch of listeners who come and people say, oh, I watch your show. It's like, oh, really? Well, we don't know unless you say hello to us.
100%, and that's why it's so great to see the likes of Jackson Fowler tune in for the first time today. Also, Joel Terry popped over to my chat as well and said, preach, Simon, preach.
Well, I think it's really cool that thanks to our mate Scott, we are going out live on a radio station in Finland. This is the wonders of technology. Here we are in central Auckland. We're simulcasting to 9 or 10 different social media platforms and a radio station in Helsinki. And I'm going to do that as much as possible. As I said earlier, Scott has asked me to do the occasional live set on my turntables. Now, the thing is, for people in Helsinki, they are only hearing us. They're not seeing, they're not getting a video feed. It is just audio, which is what Icecast was designed to do. All right, shall we move on to the next article?
Yep, sure thing.
Okay, all right. Guys in the audience, one of the things that you don't know about Eeryk is that he's had so many of those COVID injections, he doesn't need a cell phone to access the Wi-Fi. I mean, that is how many of those mRNA vaccines the kid has had. And I joke about this, but he has suffered from some serious health side effects because of that, as many people have. But I don't know that he's ever had space cancer. Kid, have you ever had space cancer?
Not yet. Never say never.
Never. I don't know about the rest of you, but I definitely don't want space cancer. So I thought I would bring this up because I thought it was pretty interesting. Hang on, let me bring it up. Nokia is putting the first cellular network on the moon. And as everyone knows, cell towers cause cancer. But I thought this was really, really fascinating. The radiation-hardened technology will get its first test in an upcoming mission to the lunar South Pole, writes Jacek Krauko. And this is for MIT. This is the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I've had quite a bit to do with that organization over the years. It is the birthplace of the free software movement. If you know about the AI lab at MIT, if you know who Richard Stallman is, these are the guys who talk about this stuff. They often have a fascinating insight into things technology. And I thought this in particular would you guys would find interesting. Here we go. Later this month, Intuitive Machines, the private company behind the first commercial lander that touched down on the moon, will launch a second lunar mission from NASA's Kennedy Space Center. The plan is to deploy a lander, a rover, and a hopper to explore a site near the lunar South Pole that could harbor water ice and to put a communication satellite in lunar orbit. But the mission will also bring something that's never been installed on the moon or anywhere else in space before, a fully functional 4G cellular network. Point-to-point radio communications, which need a clear line of sight between transmitting and receiving antennas, have always been a backbone of both surface communications and links back to Earth, starting with the Apollo program. Using point-to-point radio in space wasn't much of an issue in the past because there has never been that many points to connect. Usually it was just a single spacecraft, a lander, a rover talking to Earth. Excuse me, and they didn't need to send much data either. They were based on ultra-high frequency, which is UHF, everyone knows, connecting to a small number of devices with relatively low data throughput. And of course, if you're actually building out infrastructure, you need something which has more bandwidth and supports more devices, and these guys are doing it. I think this is just absolutely a wonderful advance that we've got this sort of technology actually going out beyond our planet. What do you reckon, kid?
Oh, I think it's awesome, though there could be a little bit of an issue because, as far as I'm aware, like astronauts are only really trained to deal with 3Gs, not 4.
Yeah, and the other thing is, don't you think it's interesting that they chose 4G rather than 5G? And it's because, it's just like, for most circumstances, 4G is most appropriate.
Well,
I've got... Go
yeah,
ahead.
well, the other issue with the 5G is some lunatic will make a homemade rocket, try and shoot himself up there and chop it down.
Yeah. Well, look, I've got a mate who's worked at Google for a long time, and Google, at least, maybe that they were famous for having this really, really rigorous selection process for their personnel. And my friend Josh got through it and was working for Google in San Francisco or around there, somewhere around there. He was certainly living in San Francisco, and he got this job and was like, fantastic. What's it like working at Google? And he said, Vince Cerf is in the office next door to me. Now, for those who don't know, Vince Cerf was one of those guys. He was an early internet pioneer, a guy back in like the 1970s who was working on the construction of some of the core internet protocols, but ever since has been working on a project called the Galactic Internet. All right. And it's about working on a system to create a data network which is appropriate for transmission across large distances. Now, I haven't heard an awful lot about that project for about at least 10 or 15 years. I'm not sure what he ever got up to with that, but I just think firstly, it's fantastic that a guy I know was in, had an office next door to Vince Cerf, who's just super famous to all of us turbo nerds. But secondly, that there are people around like him working, the big brains working on these big projects. How do you do interplanetary data communication for the internet? How do you put cellular infrastructure onto the moon to make it useful. And, you know, I just think all of these advances in technology are just simply wonderful.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more as well. I mean, I sometimes I think I kind of want to be put into some form of deep sleep so that I can wake up one day where I'm just, you know, sending out a tweet and some guy on Saturn or in some little thing floating above Saturn is just there like, ha, that guy's an uninformed far right lunatic. How dare he? You know, I'm quite fond of the indigenous population of Saturn, otherwise known as gas. So you know, it's it's really interesting to see how this stuff has progressed, and even just the last 20 years for things that are on Earth. I mean, 20 years ago, you wouldn't dream of us doing what we're doing right now. That would be, some people would have called it ridiculous, that we could be streaming to so many different platforms at once, be in New Zealand and be on a Finnish radio station, simply from, you know, our homes. It's ridiculous.
It's just astonishing, right? You know, and when you think, like, throughout my lifetime, like the first time I used the internet was 1985. It wasn't even called the internet when I first started using it. It was called the ARPANET, and I used a 300 baud modem that I borrowed off this dude. And a 300 baud was an acoustic coupler. I mean, you guys wouldn't even know what a modem is these days, but back then it was even before the plug-in modem. So what it had two like neoprene cups, and what you used to do to connect to the internet was dial the phone, like it actually had a dialer, and then when you got the signal sound, you would put the handset into the cups and you'd get this really, really slow connection. The other thing at the time, well, actually no, about 5 or 6 years later, you could use the internet in New Zealand for free. Like Waikato University, also Wellington City Council. I use Wellington City Council. They just, if you wanted an internet connection, you just called them up and said, hey, I'd like an internet account, and they gave you one. So, you know, it's sort of like, you know, just watching throughout my lifetime, watching all of the evolution of this technology is, you know, it's kind of like, you know, imagine watching the Earth being made in 7 days. It's kind of like that. And, you know, you talking to older people, like my grandmother, for instance, she could remember the introduction of electricity and trains into New Zealand. And you sort of think, okay, now me and this kid are talking to people over a radio station in Finland because we pressed a few buttons. It certainly is a bit of a change. All right, you got some people in your chat you want to talk to?
Unfortunately not. I'm very disappointed, Joel. Joel's probably ditched me for you, I suspect.
Well, I do. I see Crunkster is in here. G'day, nice to see you. There's a bunch of conversation which is pretty much not including us, mate. My people are talking amongst themselves rather than talking to us, which is all good. All right. What was the next article that you had for us? I think you were going to talk to us about Manurewa Marae. Is that right?
Yeah, this is the article from ZB discussing the inquiry that's come back on some of the findings with respect to failures found in data safeguards, as well as the Stats New Zealand chief executive deciding to call it quits. This is from Jamie Ensor, News Talk ZB. So it starts, an inquiry ordered by the Prime Minister has identified significant failures with public agencies, protections of New Zealanders' personal information and management of conflict of interests. The findings are so serious for Stats NZ that Chief Executive Mark Selden will leave at the end of his current term, something Public Service Commissioner Sir Brian Roche says is the right thing to do. Selden, the government statistician, won't seek reappointment when his contract ends. His decision to step down reflects the standard of accountability expected of public service chief executives.
I'd take issue with that. I would take issue with that. Like, okay, you know, it is a slap across the chops, and he is leaving under a cloud. But they have allowed this man to resign gracefully. You know, he has. It's malfeasance in public office. He has overseen an organisation which has corruptly provided information to another corrupt organisation because he is utterly committed to critical race theory. right? Because it had anything to do with the thing with Maori data sovereignty. He just looked and went, oh yeah, these guys over here are some Maoris. I can just disregard the law, and everyone who reports to me inside Stats New Zealand can too, and give over New Zealand citizens' information. Now, the simple fact of the matter is that people have committed crimes here. Allowing him to resign gracefully at the end of his term, while it is more accountability than we are used to in our civil service, particularly over the last 6 years, I don't think personally it goes far enough. I would like to have seen the consequences for this man and the people whose malfeasance in public office allowed this to happen. I would like to see their punishments being a little bit stiffer.
Yeah, I agree. The investigation, which is the important element here, focused on public agencies' actions, which was sparked by allegations last year that data provided to health and social services providers at Manirua Marae for the purpose of Census 23 and COVID-19 vaccinations was misused. And this is what I take issue with more so than anything else, the fact that despite the fact this was all sparked by such allegations, the findings of this report don't really do much to resolve the validity of said allegations. I mean, the validity of the allegations, which anyone who has spent more than 5 minutes looking into it understand are pretty substantial, and it's quite a slam dunk as far as I'm concerned. But the fact that this is an investigation that's gone on for months, and ultimately we're no closer to resolving the issue, holding anyone accountable for the issue, specifically with respect to Te Pāti Māori and the Manirua Marae. But here we are talking about everything else. It was claimed personal information was improperly used to favour Te Pāti Māori in the Māori electorate of Tamaki Makaurau. Those allegations have been denied by those involved, but the government wanted assurances Kiwis' data had been adequately safeguarded by the agencies that shared it. Among the findings of the 73-page report from Michael Heron KC and Pania Gray is that the Ministry of Health and Health New Zealand Te Whatu Ora didn't have control over data once downloaded by providers, had no means for ensuring providers were meeting contractual expectations, and had no safeguards for managing potential conflicts of interest. Stats NZ was found to have insufficient arrangements to protect the shared data. Among these was the removal of a requirement for confidentiality without any officials with the power to remove this requirement agreeing to that action. The privacy assessment was also not finalised. So really what they've done is, rather than, also looking into whether or not the data was in fact misused, they have kind of just gone as far as saying, okay, it was more than possible it was misused because of the lack of these safeguards and so forth. So what that means is Te Pāti Māori now have the Tamaki Makaurau electorate seat, which they won by like 40-something votes. And if you look specifically at the Manirua Marae polling booth, it's quite statistically different to the rest of the polling booths in the electorate, which suggests, yeah, there probably was something a little bit fishy going on here that could easily be directly related to a misuse of data as discussed here. Have you got any thoughts on that, Simon?
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, I've seen those statistics, and it is an outlier. It is statistically improbable that one particular polling booth would be so absolutely different compared to all of the others. Yes, there could be other factors involved, personal influence and all that sort of thing, but I don't think that anyone is even really entertaining those. John Tamaheri was himself recorded during a Zoom session with 3 other people who are involved with that trust, talking about doing things that they knew that were against the law and encouraging to people doing it and their justification was, white people cheat, so we should cheat too. I think it's well past time that man is defunded, because don't forget, there are millions and millions, tens of millions of dollars are given to the Waipira Trust to do a whole bunch of stuff that they don't. All it does is buy a new car for John Tamaheri, another multi-million-dollar home somewhere. This is money that is, I don't believe, being spent for the purpose that it was intended, and I don't think it's good taxpayer-funded spending. So over and above these investigations and whatever happens in terms of prosecutions for some of the illegalities that have occurred, what I think is even more important is that we just stop paying John Tamaheri and all his little corporations inside that fiefdom millions and millions of dollars of taxpayers' money. But I'm open to an alternative point of view about this, guys in the chat. I'd be very interested in hearing what you think about it.
Suit and Tie states that the real scandal was the Electoral Commission, which allowed the marae to be used as a voting place in the first place. And frankly, I agree. And the reason I agree with this is because I actually know a friend of mine who was working the polling booth at the election. And he was talking about, it was just bizarre how kind of you could make a really strong argument that the behaviour of Te Pāti Māori that day at that particular polling booth was very much in breach of the law. Anything from a slight intimidating presence to anyone that kind of wasn't going to be voting a particular way, as much. Let me reword that. And then all the way to, I think, Takatai Tash Kemp actually showing up at the marae. And obviously she's the chief executive, but she was also the candidate in that electorate, showing up to the polling booth for some time as well, making her influence known. And they also had, I believe, some form of incentives connected to the marae, either on the days or very, very closely around it, which was still within a breach of the electoral law. So there was a lot of stuff going on there. They never should have allowed the location that is run by the candidate be used as a polling booth. It was a ludicrous decision to allow it to happen, and ultimately we're in a position where that one polling booth was the difference between one candidate and another candidate, and it was an election outcome which caused an overhang in our parliament as well. So overhangs aren't insignificant because they don't happen all the time, and this result had a large impact on that.
Yeah, well, I have two thoughts about that to share with you. The first is that the Electoral Commission were warned beforehand that this was inappropriate, but they did it anyway. And it's because they are critical race theory people who think, oh, okay, it's Maori people, John Tamaheri wants it, we can break the law and do it. And making that decision against the interests of New Zealand and against the interests of our democracy has, as they were pre-warned at the time, come back to haunt them. And I hope that all of those people inside the Electoral Commission who have betrayed the New Zealand people not only lose their jobs, I hope that they are properly prosecuted. Because when you attack a fundamental pillar of our democracy in that manner, you have committed a significant crime. The second thought that I'll share with you is this. Your friend who is a direct witness to this stuff, has he been interviewed by the police, by any authority, about what he witnessed?
I'm going to go on the side of no, but I'm not entirely sure. We talk from time to time, but outside of giving me his own experience, he hasn't told me if he's interacted with any authorities. So yeah.
All right. Well, look. Would he maybe have a chat? See if you'd like to come onto the show and talk to us about it.
Perhaps. But yeah. There was one other thing though with this entire thing, and that was the relation to the Ministry of Health kind of being caught up with failing to implement adequate protocols to prevent data breaches and so forth, or the misuse of it, and also how that's kind of how that relates to the potential resignations we've seen in the last week or two. Because there's been a lot of criticism of the government that the resignations within the health ministry are because the government aren't very aligned with the higher ups in the Ministry of Health, which is probably accurate anyway. But that, they're not giving the funding that the Ministry of Health wants, and that ultimately that the government is the bad guy, and that's resulting in a lot of instability within the system. But it does beg the question, is there the potential here that some of the higher ups in the Ministry of Health, seeing that these findings don't shine a particularly good light on them, have decided, okay, I'm already kind of under pressure in my position right now, here's a good excuse to just get out and resign. I don't know, I just don't think that's something that's particularly been mentioned, certainly not by the media, and I thought it was worth considering.
Yeah, and like what you got was a whole bunch of ideological wokesters that were put in by the Ardern regime who just destroyed our health system, right? And often they were selected because of because immutable characteristics like their sex, like their gender identity, well, not the gender identity is immutable, like their race and so on. And I've seen some criticism coming in from the left-wing extremists in the Labour Party that, oh, look how they're not celebrating diversity by allowing all of these incompetent women to continue in their roles. Well, in point of fact, National is actually embracing diversity because they're embracing diversity of thought. Diversity of thought is what matters amongst people. That is how you reach a reasonable consensus between different point of views. Diversity of immutable characteristics, like a person's race or sex, is insignificant, with the obvious exception of gingerkind.
Yes.
All right, I do have a comment that I have to address in the chat. Matua, that Emmy dude is a dude. He is a man, and I strongly suggest not having anything to do with him. I've seen that guy up close, and it is not pretty. I don't think that he is very well.
What man is this?
Emmy Rakati.
Oh,
He's
yes, someone just sent me a message about that too.
Yeah. So I think it is best to avoid anything to do with that man. He is my. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I don't think that he is well. Chainsaw Charlie is here. I've never seen Chainsaw before. Good evening. How does Tutai Ferris beat Rhino, Uncle Fester, Terry Cartney in the South Island? To be honest, I don't know who Uncle Fester is. Maybe that's Christopher Luxon?
I don't know. But actually, it is worth noting, though, because obviously your gingerkind slander is, more than fair. But Luxon is, I mean, he's a ginger, is he not? He's just a bald one.
I think he might be. And
you look at his kids.
Yeah, well, that would certainly explain a few things. All right, you ready for our next article?
Quickly before that, I do have a couple things. Firstly, Joel just mentions that he's waiting to administer some diabetes medication for someone who thought it was a good idea to have some dry ginger ale. I do wish you luck with that, Joel. But Sudan Tai notably says, I'm picking Tamahira and the Māori Party will start to distance themselves from the Manirua Marae and pitch it as they went rogue and weren't aware of what was happening. I certainly think that they would be more than willing to throw someone under the bus to save face, but I don't know if that's how they would do it, though. But I think that was a thoughtful comment, more so than anything else. Also, Harold Demure says, avoid Emi Rakete at all costs. Fun fact about that is I actually one of my colleagues is his stepbrother. So yeah, it's quite interesting how bloody small the world is, but too small for my liking.
Well, it's 2 degrees of separation here in New Zealand. Matua Kahurangi in the chat says that Hipkins is 97.3% ginger. Which is pretty funny. Okay, guys, if you're a regular viewer of the show, you'll know that I'm really strong on climate nonsense. There is no climate crisis. It is just a vehicle that the leftists use to impose socialist policies upon the population. It is hugely expensive. It damages our economies, and it achieves nothing because it is not a real problem. Anthropogenic global warming is a complete belief system. It is not an academic discipline. Huge amounts of our money are spent upon it. Now, for an environmentalist like me, I think of the opportunity cost of that. All of that money that is being spent on climate horseshit could be spent on actually improving the environment, doing things like investing in technology to protect endangered species, to rewild areas that have been polluted in the past by mining and things like that. And this is something that the extremists inside the Green Party, for example, do not care about. They don't actually care about the environment because they are not environmentalists. What they are is communists who use the fairy tale of the climate to propose extremist policies which cost us a lot of money. Fortunately for me, Donald Trump agrees. Let me bring up this article. This comes to us from Le Monde in France, and I'm sorry to everyone who doesn't speak French, but I will translate it for you. Le Monde is, I think, the largest French daily, and it is very, very left-wing. And this was very funny to read because they are having a total meltdown about Donald Trump. All right. To them, to organizations like Le Monde, it is unreasonable to ever question the science, what they call the science. All right. Firstly, climate Scientology is not science. It is a belief system. Trust me when I say, when the leader of your movement is a 17-year-old Swedish retarded girl, you are not a scientific academic discipline. What you are is a belief system. That is the first point. The second point is questioning the science is how science works. All right. References to change in the climate have been censored by the state inside the United States and across agencies. It writes 404. There's a 404 error at La Maison Blanche, at the White House, and at other state departments, including the Department of State, the Department of Defense, the Department of Transport, the Department of Agriculture, and the departure of for the protection of the environment. If you look up climate Scientology, climate science, and all of that sort of stuff on any of those major American websites, state-run websites by the various departments and agencies of the American government, it is completely removed. Donald Trump has said, this is horseshit. We're not talking about this nonsense anymore. If it is not real science, it is not going up on a government-funded website because it is misinformation and because it is disinformation. This is driving the leftists apoplectic. What do you reckon, kid?
Oh, anything that drives the leftists crazy is a win for the world, really. Because the more unstable they become, you would hope the more people wake up to their craziness. Although
Yeah.
I say that, but sometimes I feel like it's the other way around, and the more crazy they get, the more people get behind them. And just look at the Greens. But yeah, I mean, Trump taking that stance isn't, and for his administration isn't exactly surprising, and it's good to see a little bit of I don't know, rationalism returning to the office of the president, the most powerful man in the world, if we're being completely powerful political office. I'm not going to say most powerful man, most powerful political office in the world. So yeah, I mean, I like to hear it. I hope more governments around the world start adopting a similar stance, particularly our government. But we're not going to get anything like that from Cindy Boy. Instead, he's going to start or continue to appoint the climate cultists to anything related to the climate, be that Nicola Willis or Chris Bishop, who enjoys driving around in his Leaf. So, yeah.
Yeah, you're exactly right. They've bought into that. But I wonder how much of Chris Luxon's devotion to that blue-green, being a nominally conservative politician who has embraced green ideology, is driven by his willingness to align with the strategic interests of large investment groups like BlackRock, because they're all about that climate stuff. And Chris Luxon is someone who's certainly thinking about what his next job is going to be post-politics. And if we're lucky, that is going to be very, very soon. And it will probably be in the corporate world inside North America. So he'll be lining that up. Socialite is here. Good to see you, young man. He says, good evening, and good evening, Blue Eyes. I think he means you. I see Winston has been having fun in Parliament today regarding Ricardo Menendez activism regarding the name of our country. Yeah, that was really good to see. And he makes a very, very good point. What we have is this Mexican Marxist who's coming here and telling other New Zealanders how to live. And this is, I think many, many New Zealanders are sick and tired of that. We have become a dumping ground over the last couple of decades for far left extremists who come here, they commit awful crimes sometimes, and they tell us what to do. You think of the likes of, Chanel Lal. Here we have this greasy Indian who comes here and participates and racks up a group of people who attack a women's rights rally. You think of Aliana Rabashkin, who was the person who assaulted him, Bali Haque in education, Julianne Genter, the Green Party MP. These people, they come to our country and they tell us how to live, and I think a lot of people are really, really annoyed by that. It's sort of like, well, it's okay that you want to come and build a life here amongst us, but it'd be nice if you made a little bit more of an effort to fit in with what most people think. And as the tyrant Ardern said about the anti-mandate protests in Wokington, this ideology feels imported. And when it comes to Ricardo Mendes March and his totally extremist Marxist ideology, it is very much imported. What did you make of Winston having a crack at him?
Oh, I loved it. I was a bit busy, so I didn't quite get the chance to, put it up in big bright lights for everyone to see. But we've seeing a little bit more of this from New Zealand First in the last few weeks. They're really just starting to just take a no nonsense with this stuff, more so, at least more vocally. I think part of that is I think Winston Peters is about to kind of step back from the role of Deputy Prime Minister and be basically just purely a foreign minister soon. So that means he can probably stir the pot a little bit more than he has been.
Yeah, and it's good that he'll do that. And I think that's good because, he's got a year of not being Deputy Prime Minister, which gives him a little bit more latitude to differentiate between National and ACT and to do a little bit of politicking on behalf of New Zealand First with a view to the next election. And what I really like about it is that between him and Shane Jones, they are calling a spade a spade.
Yeah, and I think they're also just timing it right. There's no point coming out, all guns blazing in the first term or the first year of the term. Now that we're getting closer and closer to the next election, it makes sense to start trying to kind of get a gauge of where the public sentiment is at. Are they indeed still going to run back to Luxon as soon as the economy starts improving, or are they truly fed up, not just on an economic level, but on a social level as well, in terms of the rhetoric coming from the government, in terms of the principles that the government stands up for and holds and looks to implement. Because at the end of the day, if people are happy with our country being sold out and having no regard for the average New Zealander and allowing these ridiculous Marxists from Mexico to come over here and tell us what to do, then I suppose New Zealand First isn't going to have much luck getting any more votes out of this kind of these kinds of social media posts. But if it is the case that people are indeed fed up with this sort of thing, then that's going to start paying dividends in the next 12 to 18 months. So it's a good time to start getting a gauge of that.
I think you're right, and the national coterie around him, the blue-green faction inside Greens, are kidding themselves that support for them will build if they can improve the economy. I think New Zealand is a slow follower of international trends, but what we have seen around the world with Rassemblement National in France no longer being the most popular party of the right, with the Conservatives being overrun by Reform, poll after poll, Reform is more popular on the right than the Conservatives. The same thing is happening here, and people look at Chris Luxon's leadership, they look at him promoting apartheid on behalf of the Maori Party, implementing ludicrously restrictive climate nonsense policies on behalf of the Greens, and continuing with Jacinda Ardern's blatant attacks on New Zealanders' civil liberties, and say, no, I'm actually more concerned about what is happening to our society than what is in general happening to our economy. So maybe I'm being a little bit optimistic, but I think that the next election is ACT and New Zealand First's to lose, because there are going to be a huge number of refugees from the National Party, people who just are just sick of Chris Luxon. They're sick of the nonsense. They think they're looking and saying, well, why hasn't Eeryk Stanford removed the RSE stuff from schools yet? Why is it that we are still having these race-based roles coming out of the Ministry of Health? Why is it that we are paying millions and millions of dollars to a DEI hires company to play whale songs to trees. You know, people are thinking this stuff was supposed to end and Chris Luxon's not doing it. Socialite says in the chat, NZ First has started their re-election campaign. I think, Socialite, you might be right. Shelley agrees, and Shelley says Shane is going to be the next leader of the New Zealand First and maybe the country. Shelley, that guy is making all of the right noises. I got a lovely photograph from Shelley this week that she sent me, and that was very pleasing to do, pleasing to receive. And while I think of it, I forgot at the top of the broadcast, I thought to wish her a happy birthday. Shelley's been a long-term friend of the party, rather of the show, and it is nice to be celebrating her birthday with her. Hold on a moment, got to respond to this. Are you there, kid? Okay. Oh no, what's happened is, guys, I've lost my communication channel with the kid. Okay, all right, he can't hear. Oh, he probably can't hear me. Oh no. Okay, okay, so guys, my second camera has run out of battery, so the kid can't hear me and probably doesn't know that he's still alive on TV. Okay, I'm what I might do, I might play some music for a minute while I start up another phone so that I can talk to the kid, you guys. All right, here's some tunes for a couple of minutes while I bring the kid back. One moment. Sorry, you guys. Peace.
Alrighty.
Sorry, kid, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Sorry about that, man. The battery ran out on my phone. Oh, dude. All right, hold on. Okay, so you got me again. All right. Well, I'm playing some music at the minute, and I'll bring us back on. Hold up.
Okay, well, apparently everyone can hear me and the music's not exactly working, so I'll just start talking shit and go over their comments real quick. Joel Terry says, destabilizing the left didn't seem like it would be that achievable, but I think Destiny Church kicked a hornet's nest because now Māori who mind their own business are under pressure to denounce their own brothers and sisters, which further compartmentalizes them into groups and strips individual agency. I certainly hope that this kind of gets some people that might not necessarily be actively considering this stuff to kind of get off their butt and think about what is it they believe and how they can contribute in this space. Harold Demure says Chris Luxon is not a conservative. I 100% agree. He also reckons that Chris Luxon is rolled within the next 3 months. The problem is for whom? I think 3 months is a little bit too early. If it's going to happen at all, it'll either be, I think, at around the end of the year or kind of before the election sometime next year. What else have we got? Recidivist child amuser. That's a good one. You guys saw New Zealand First cross the line today with the Theft as Employer Act. I can't say I did see anything about New Zealand First with the theft relating to the Employer Act. You're more than welcome to fill us in there in whatever way you can. Did you at all? Are you back, Simon?
Yeah, sorry about that, dude.
Did you at all hear about the something to do with New Zealand First crossing the line with theft of the Employer Act or something? I'm not sure exactly.
No, I didn't hear anything about it. No, I didn't.
No, neither. So I don't know. If someone does have any more information, do leave that down in the chat for us. Harold also says, do you honestly think New Zealanders voters are as invested in the politics as you wish? No, New Zealanders are never going to be as invested in politics as we want them to be, because if they were, the world would generally speaking be a very different place. If everyone was especially if everyone was as stupid as myself and Simon are, we would be in a lovely world.
Yeah.
So
retards of the world unite.
But Matua Kahurangi actually says happy birthday to Shelley. So that's a good opportunity to say happy birthday, Shelley. If you're in the chat, thank you, and in the stream, thank you very much for tuning in. But yes, that is up to date on the what does that say? I do think Lux needs to stop being a jellyfish. Crikey. Crikey. Right. Thank you for that, Tim Keane.
All right. Well, look, Socialite says we need a reform party here so that we can take NZ back from the wokesters. Socialite, to a degree, I think we might have that. And Sarah, Socialite also notes that Eeryk was at Pride. Yeah, that's no surprise. Mr. JJ says Winston for PM. Good evening, Mr. JJ. Simon Futter is here. And Simon Futter says hello to me and hello to you. Simon Futter, this is young Eeryk McRae. We've been doing a Wednesday show at 8:30 most evenings. PLJ says, if you cut off funding for woke, there are suddenly 15% of the population on the dole. Well, that is true. And Viktor Orban, who is the Hungarian Prime Minister, I shared one of his tweets today, which I thought was seriously funny. So what you've got is Doge and Trump just cutting out huge amounts of money that have been going to these left-wing NGOs all over the world. And what a whole bunch of them are doing is looking for new funding, and they're going to Brussels and the European Union for it. And Viktor Orban announced, okay, well, we've had 62 applications from these left-wing organizations. Fuck you, you're not getting any money. So Hungary's going to block all of those guys from doing it. The other thing is that Rory, what's his name, who's he's the British ex-conservative politician, Rory Stewart, who does the podcast with the war criminal who used to be, goodness, Alistair Campbell. His wife is the CEO of one of those NGOs that stopped receiving money. And what they were doing was talking about urinals as modern art to Afghani women. And this video of his wife, American taxpayer funded, she's English, in Afghanistan, lecturing Afghani woman on Michel Duchot. Is that the guy who did the urinal art 100 years ago? And you can see all these Afghan women looking at her like, what? And yeah, it's that sort of stuff. So I absolutely agree. We should be getting rid of them. Shortland Chambers notes that monkeypox is back in the news. Yeah, some of that advertising that is coming out of the Burnett Foundation, the previous AIDS Foundation, some of that, I mean, it is just highly sexualized. Firstly, we should not be paying the New Zealand taxpayer should not be paying for promiscuity amongst high-risk communities. And secondly, that sort of advertising, which is deliberately provocative, it is often aimed at at young people and children should not be produced at all, and certainly should not be taxpayer funded. Organizational Corkscrew, which is a cool nickname. Cheap viewers on Stream Boo. Okay, sounds to me like you are an advertising bot. Even though you've got a cool nickname, I am going to block you. All right. Do you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, just about that Burnett Foundation ad. It actually is ingrained in my head. That's how, how filthy it was. And all I can picture is the backside of Christopher Luxon going down on a fully tattooed up Maori gentleman. It's just... Yeah, I mean, apparently that's what it looks like from... yeah, it looks like Christopher Luxon. But yeah, I don't know how they can continue to get away with this stuff, but I suppose that's what happens when the people making funding decisions are degenerates. So.
Yeah. Well, Socialite notes in the chat, I don't like the anti-homosexual stance, but I like that Destiny Church has stood up to protect children from the gender woo-woo. Yeah, Socialite, and more of that. And, there is a lot of rainbow, a lot of resentment building amongst the general population about the excesses of the rainbow community. We are sick of paying for the Burnett Foundation to produce how-to guides to consuming human fecal matter for sexual gratification. We are sick of them advertising anal sex to children and young people. We don't want to be paying for monkeypox for promiscuous people. We don't want to be paying paying for PrEP for homosexual men who prefer not to wear condoms. These sorts of things make people angry. You add that to the RSC education, to grooming time in schools, to gender ideology, to violent rainbow extremists beating women in parks. People are getting really tired of that really, really quickly. Citizen of Auckland is here. Oh, okay. Citizen of Auckland. I got a picture from a friend of Citizens of Auckland that showed that he got an OIA response that was heavily redacted. It was extremely funny. I don't know if there are other pages, but the pages that I saw were completely blacked out. The police do not want to provide that man with information that he is entitled to. I'm also looking forward. I understand that Citizen of Auckland has some new of his silent audits, that he has conducted some of those, and that they might be released shortly. All right, you got anyone in your chat you need to talk to?
No, nothing there. They're just more talking amongst themselves. But it's great to see the activity in the chat nonetheless.
It really is.
So, yes.
I think it's actually quite funny, like, because often you see that people are they're not really sort of watching the broadcast, they're more talking to each other, and you and me are just in the background to the conversations that they're having. All right, and guys, and I'm sorry about the disruption before. What happened was that I hadn't plugged in my second phone, the one that I use so that Eeryk can see and hear me, and the battery ran out. All right, so that was a complete Simon TV type fuck up that we got here on the Eeryk and Simon show. All right, I have another article for you which I thought this was absolutely hilarious, and I really want to get the kids' take on it. It comes to us from Spiked Online and Megan Murphy, who writes, Canada is crying out for an anti-woke leader. Canadians are sick of Justin Castro, but the opposition needs to be bolder and more populist. Canada's hated Prime Minister, ooh, ouch, announced he was resigning last month. Most Canadians rejoiced at the apparent end of Justin Castro's reign. His Liberal Party was facing death. Support had fallen to just 16% by the end of December, an all-time low. In truth, Castro had not actually resigned. He merely announced he planned to resign. That is a good point. He was aware he was facing a no-confidence motion, which would force him to resign and force an election, which Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives were practically guaranteed to win. To avoid this, he froze Parliament. It was very, very Machiavellian, but you've got to admire the man. That was the right thing for a communist to do who wants to remain in power. The article continues, he was essentially holding Canada hostage so he could buy time. This gave him 2.5 months approximately until Parliament would resume in March. An election is now not likely to happen until October, though what might happen in the meantime is concerning. Kid, what did you make of all of that?
Well, obviously, I knew Trudeau did the kind of said he was going to resign, but nothing's really come of it. I heard about this, but I haven't actually. Um, yeah, outside of you sharing the article with me, I haven't really seen much of this at all. But it makes sense that Canada is indeed in dire need of something new, something fresh, a leader who isn't. I mean, let's be honest. I don't even know what to call Justin Castro at this point. That isn't that. I mean, all I do when I imagine what Justin is doing is just him with his legs crossed, like there's nothing between his legs. Um, like
Yeah,
I
that
just
that was not
you
a good
can't.
look. That was
Yeah,
not a good look. That was not a good look. All right. Well, the article continues. The public has grown sick of his woke platitudes. He constantly claimed that he is the only politician standing up for women's rights, while simultaneously insisting that trans women are women. His approach to COVID-19 and treatment of the truckers' protest was shockingly authoritarian. He has also destroyed the economy, with many Canadians no longer able to buy a home or even groceries. The timing of Trudeau's suspension of Parliament was convenient. He knew Donald Trump's tariff threat was incoming. Kid, did you catch Donald Trump calling him Governor Trudeau?
I didn't actually, but I like it.
All right, so he was in the White. This was only a couple of weeks ago. I thought this was just just a fantastic slap across the chops for Justin Castro, sitting in the White House behind the resolution desk or whatever it's called in the in the Oval Office, and he referred to Justin Castro as Governor Justin Trudeau. That is a mammoth slight, because of course Justin Castro, he is to Canada what Jacinda Ardern was to New Zealand, a far left extremist who uses woke to impose anti-democratic policies upon the population. But I want to bring your attention back to the title of this article, which is this: Canada is crying out for an anti-woke leader. And what I'd say to you, Eeryk, and what I'd ask everyone in the chat is this: fucking aren't we all? Like, don't we in New Zealand want an anti-woke leader?
And this highlights something very important for me, and it's sure this Pierre guy that's leading their Conservatives. From what I've seen of him, he seems like a great change. However, he's still in a large established political party, and as we know, large established political parties that are regarded as the conservative centre right option in Western nations aren't always what they're cracked up to be. Um, but um, when I look at Pierre here versus the likes of Luxon, I would say, yeah, I'll take that guy. When I see even many of the people that are options in the UK Conservatives, I'll be like, yeah, I'll take him or her over Luxon. I know you like Kemi Badenoch quite a lot, especially compared to Luxon. So you know, yeah, we're all crying out for it, I fear. But just because you decide to ditch the woke leftist doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get rid of the woke leader. So yeah, I'm not sure whether or not Pierre here is going to be the saving grace Canada needs, but I'm sure it will be a far better direction than they're currently going on.
I think so too, but he's got a Herculean task ahead of him, trying to repair Canada, like we have in New Zealand. The harm that occurred under the Ardern regime, that tore at the fabric of our society, that absolutely devastated our economy, is going to take generations to repair. And when you're in a circumstance like that, what you need is a leader of conviction who is prepared to make the hard choices and is prepared to turn the ship and to actually improve things. And here in New Zealand, instead of all of that, we have Cindy Boy.
Crikey. um, yeah, but what I do think when I see this this leader of the Conservative Party in Canada is I just picture him having that interview with that person in the media, whatever that journalist, so-called journalist was, questioning him on a range of things, and he's sitting there and he's looking at the journalist just eating an apple, and he's just like, what does that mean? And he's trying to really grind. Okay, why are you asking these questions? What's the basis of this question? How does this question relate to me? Why am I being asked this? And it's really, he was kind of picking apart at the integrity and the credibility of this journalist. And so I was like, look, I'm not gonna stand for this nonsense of you trying to spin a narrative. I am who I am. I stand for what I stand for, and nothing you say is going to change that. And so, if that's any indication of how he's going to do as the next Prime Minister of Canada, I think Canada can be pretty happy, at least in the next, at least for a few years, until they kind of get a grasp of how good he actually is.
Yeah, well, more power to them. But it will be very interesting to see how their relationship develops with with the United States. And a lot of people have made the comment to me that, look, the trade relationship between Canada and the United States is very, very strong. They're Canada's number one trading partner. That takes an awful lot to undo. And while that's true, it is not. It's not without historical precedents. Like up until the 1950s, when Castro Sr. took over Cuba, Cuba was the United States' third largest trading partner, and the Americans completely cut them off, I think in 1958, when the Batista government was overthrown. The Batista government was very, very American friendly. You had American, often mafia-run casinos. You had huge sugar plantations that were supplying American corporations like Coca-Cola and all that sort of thing. And Cuba was, for a small country, because it's only like, 8 or 9 million Cuban people, were the United States' third largest trading partner, and the Americans had no trouble kicking them to the curb. It is not outside the realms of possibility that they could do a very, very similar thing to Canada, except with the notable exception, I think, of perhaps the energy sector.
Yeah, that is interesting. But I mean, I suppose the difference here is Canada isn't Cuba, I suppose. But I mean, if the US has done it to one Castro, they're more than happy to do it to another. So that begs the question. Do I personally think it would go to such lengths where the trade partnership deteriorates to such a level that it's, at least in the kind of short term, irreparable? No, but yeah, I certainly think that we could see some hefty economic sanctions if Trump doesn't get his way. So at least I would believe.
Yeah, and certainly the threat of them. But I think that a lot of Canadians would side with Trump. They'd say, well, look, he's got a point here. We've got this government that took away truck drivers' bank accounts for refusing to take a vaccine. Trump's looking pretty good to us around about now. It'll be very interesting to see how that relationship develops. But I think it's interesting to learn that while Justin Castro has, according to the leftist media, resigned the position of Prime Minister because his party has lost so much confidence amongst the Canadian people that they can't win an election, with the truth of the matter where what he has effectively done is prorogue Parliament to maintain power till October or November. Simon Futta says, look, I was so happy when the national government got in and there were new policies. They have my attention for sure. Yeah, I know what you mean. Sue says, good evening, Sue, nice to see you. Watching Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell on election night, I was so confused. I mistook Rory for Elliot Page. Oh my God, that's harsh. That is harsh, but it's true. Now that you say it, he does look like Elliot Page. But that was fantastic watching those guys in their coverage because they were utterly convinced that Kamala Harris was going to win. They just could not believe when Trump won, and watching them trying to reconcile their left-wing mainstream media just categorically convinced that it was going to be the end of the world if Donald Trump was elected, with the fact that he actually won, was delicious. I don't know about you, Sue, but I got a great deal of satisfaction out of watching that war criminal and that dickhead get their beans that night.
I've also got a few people in the chat. Very quickly, because some people are wondering. recidivist child amuser was wondering where my flag background is. Because I'm wearing black, the flag background is a little bit difficult to implement without everything looking crazy on the screen. So, yes, unfortunately today I've skipped that. Maybe next week. He also says woke in government and a constitutional monarchy goes through departments as obesity goes through muscle. Interesting. I'm not sure how to process that, to be completely honest. Donald Shimoda, though, he brings up a interesting point. Got to be clear, Cindy didn't trash New Zealand because she was woke. She trashed New Zealand because she was incompetent. This is where I will push back. I disagree. I don't think she was incompetent at all. I think she was incompetent, or she appeared to be incompetent, at implementing what people wanted her to implement. She was extremely competent in implementing everything she wanted to. And that's because she had no intention to do what you wanted her to do. She only did what she wanted to do and to advance her aim of utterly destroying the country. The idea that she could do what she did and not do it intentionally, to me, is extremely implausible, because there is no way you go out of your way, that you utilize the media to the extent that you did. You use the platform that she was just handed on a platter because of COVID, and then not have the ability to control the outcomes of things. And fundamentally, she did. She was in full control during that time period. Everything bad that happened was planned. It was deliberate. And you have a tough time kind of, talking me down off that hill.
All right, and Harold Demure, who I haven't seen in the chat before, good evening, says, good points, Eeryk. I think you are right. All right, we're probably due for another article. What do you reckon?
Yep, certainly. What am I up to?
You're up to the Troons.
The Troons. Oh, yes, the Troons, the Zizian cult one.
Yeah, I'll just bring it up. All right, this comes to us from the New York Post. Take it away, kid.
So, the New York Post by Dana Kennedy and Megan Palin. A Zizian, I'm going to presume that's how it's said, because that's a rather bizarre name, isn't it? As a Zizian cult leader is arrested. Here's what the vegan transgender group believes and other disturbing deaths members are linked to. Now,
Wait. I got to jump in here.
Yeah.
Vegan transgender group. Let's just take a moment to savor the beauty of that term. This is a Zizian cult who are a vegan transgender extremist group. Have I got that right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm like, if a reason I wanted to highlight this is because if there was anything that really, if there was any manifestation of wokeness that leads to just utter destruction, this is it. Veganism, stay away from it. Gender ideology, stay away from it, because if you don't, you'll become a vegan transgender cult member going around killing people. You've been warned. Now, mysterious alleged Zizian cult leader Jack Lesota was arrested alongside an accomplice in Maryland on Monday. So, for those that are wondering, it is, of course, in the US. The elusive head of the largely transgender vegan group had gone as far as to apparently fake his own death in 2022 to avoid scrutiny. However, at the time of Lesota's arrest, he was wanted in both California and Pennsylvania. Taken into custody alongside were alleged followers Daniel Blank, 26, and Michelle Zako, 32, a person of interest in the double murder of her parents, both fatally shot in their heads at their home on New Year's Eve 2022. Their deaths are 2 of 4 linked to the cult, which is based around Lesota, 34, who previously went by Ziz online alongside an elderly landowner in California and a Border Patrol agent killed in a shootout with another member of the group in Vermont on January 20th.
Starting to get real Charles Manson vibes off this guy.
Except, whilst I'm sure that Charles, when he was younger, was rather charming, something tells me this Jack guy really wasn't particularly charming. As you can see, if you scroll down a little bit, you can see a great big photo of him. Reminds me of this this female serial killer who's quite popular and she was just a hideous thing. But this is the male version. Really not. It's really what you see every single time you go to one of those trans rights activist rallies. This is the average person you'll see there. It's most certainly a sickness, and you can see exactly why. Um, to continue, police say members of the Zizian group could number as high as 30, and they appear to be mainly young trans women, so young men, who are math and computer whizzes. Okay, a little bit close to home for one or two of us here, Simon, who previously worked at NASA, Google, and on Wall Street.
Wow.
Yeah, they gather around Ziz, who was born male but now identifies as female and grew up in Alaska before moving to the Bay Area. There he gathered acolytes who believe in the same eccentric and arcane blend of Silicon Valley driven rationalist movement theories and animal rights. Careful, Brenton Tarrant might get an idea. Both investigators and people who know the Zizians told the Post many of them have been estranged from their parents, some are thought to be on the autism spectrum, and that they are an anti sex group who take hormones for their gender transitions. I think this is a very important paragraph here. And mostly the autism spectrum thing, because let's be real, gender ideology is something which is extremely dangerous to people who are very much on the spectrum because you know they are the sorts of people who are more likely to fall for this. They're more likely to think, okay, yes, I feel a little bit different, something's off about me, maybe this is a great explanation as to why. Okay, so I mustn't be a guy, I must be a chick because I feel wrong inside, and that's what the teacher told me, and because I'm an autist, I accept whatever the teacher tells me. And I understand autism's a spectrum. I'm 100% on it. But there is, this is a classic example of why gender ideology is so dangerous because in extremes, it leads to utter tragedy. And I think this particular case of up to 30 mostly transgender, transgender women, so men who are confused, they're going out and apparently murdering people, including their own family members. The Zizians are involved in esoteric practices like unihemispheric sleep, a practice not dissimilar to hypnosis, where adherents are told to sleep with one eye open in a state of chronic exhaustion. The practice is meant to prove the two hemispheres of the brain are distinct identities, with one side thought to be female and one male, one side thought to be good and the other evil. The two sides often desire to kill each other, according to Lasota's blog. See, this is some weird batshit stuff, and that kind
Yeah.
of that is not too not particularly uncommon in cults where they believe this rather bizarre type of thing. Um, but it's also highlights the fundamental issue with gender ideology because this is the sort of stuff that gender ideology itself, to some degree, promotes. This idea that there is this inherent issue within your brain which kind of makes you not align with how you are physically. But it also reminds me a bit of myself and some of the issues that I've faced psychologically. And it is very much this whole two hemispheres of the brain thing seems more to me more like dissociative personality disorder. That's what it really resonates to me as being. Because it's people who don't know how to cope with whatever they've dealt with in their experience in their life. And as a result, they've dissociated, created, or adopted a different personality that's not authentic, that's not really themselves, as a means of coping and avoiding dealing with any of the trauma or the experiences that they've had in their life, which just aren't pleasant. And ultimately, that's spiraled and ended up in a position where it's turned into this extremist, cultish belief system that's underpinned and been exacerbated by the adoption of gender ideology. They talk as if they really believe they have supernatural powers and they believe movies like The Matrix are real and they can manipulate reality. They talk about the Nazis and the Holocaust a lot. They've made it very difficult and confusing to catch them. They all have so many aliases and move around a lot. We think a lot of what's happened can be tracked back to Ziz. Um, Goodness gracious, I'm finding this extremely difficult to read, so I might just get your thoughts on that for a second, Simon.
Well, right, I'll just turn to the chat for a moment. Socialite says, my sister has dissociative identity disorder. I'm very sorry to hear that, chap. It's pretty serious shit. Yeah, man, I feel horrible for you. Our heart goes out to you, Socialite, because, that's got to be difficult for the family to deal with. Matua asks, Eeryk, have you read Paul Wood's book?
Some of it. I know exactly who he was. He was actually a crucial part of my own rehabilitative process. So yes.
Right, okay, wow. What's the topic and what's the title?
I forget the actual title. Actually, it was a few years ago now. But if it's the book I'm thinking of, it goes all into um, rehabilitation, the experience within the system, and a range of things um, of that nature, and certainly from a psychological standpoint, because I think he became a psychologist or psychiatrist even after doing a long stint in prison. So
Got
yeah.
it. Got it. All right. Simon Futta noticed, yes, trauma is a hard path to try to break through. Yeah, no, I my heart goes out to anyone who is struggling with that, and and their family members, because it's often extremely difficult for everyone involved. But you have to admit, you have it, and you have to work through it. Yeah, I think that's probably right, Simon, and try to get onto a better path. PLJ says, turning back to the article, it's about mind control schemes. Yeah, that's true. And one of my guilty pleasures is that I'm a Scientology watcher. Like I follow all of the ex-Scientology members and the people who do all that kind of that cult type stuff. Everyone from the journalist Tony Ortega through to the guy who does cult deprogramming, the Englishman John Atack. I watch their videos and I read their books. There's that, and you see inside these cults this pattern of mind control and thought stopping repeated again and again, and it is very true that you see it inside transgender ideology. Kid, did you see the article that or rather the post that I put up on X a few days ago about the FGC9?
FGC, no, I think I missed that one.
Okay, all right. Well, like most people, you probably don't follow what I write on X, because mostly it's bollocks. Okay, well, the story was that there is there's a troon inside the British police who was celebrated for being a transvestite and all that sort of stuff, all part of the gender ideology which the British state and pretty much the British police as well have fully embraced, like our police here, right? As far as the New Zealand police are concerned, anything rainbow, they can commit any crime. It doesn't matter how heinous. The police are there to ensure that they are not arrested and prosecuted for it. Britain is the same thing. Now, this guy just absolutely flipped a nut and started building himself a 3D weapon. Now, the weapon in question wasn't mentioned in the article, but it is when people build 3D weapons, 99% of the time the weapon is an FGC9, and it's a 9mm gun that people do build using 3D printers and readily available metal parts. It's specifically designed to use metal parts that you can pretty much acquire from most hardware stores, and then you print out the rest of it with a 3D printer. It uses readily available 9mm ammunition, and away you go. All right, now this guy has been, he's extremely unhappy that because he was threatening people, all sorts of stuff, and was eventually identified and forced the British police to let him go. And because he hates women, as most troons do and most of the rainbow community does, he was getting very, very angry about all of that sort of thing, and was building himself a weapon, an FGC9. Now, the comment that I made about it was that this is an escalation, right? Like, when the authorities turned a blind eye to things like Aliana Rabashkin pouring tomato juice on Posey Parker, they went soft. They undercharged him, rather than being charged with premeditated political violence, which is what it was, and having police in the paper talking about this being a hate-motivated crime, as they do for other offences. He was charged with as little as they possibly could get away with, which was common assault. He served no time. His only punishment was a conviction on his record. If you think about that, it sent a message to the rainbow community that they could commit premeditated political violence, and there would be no consequences or very, very minor consequences. Before he was actually convicted of that offence, he released a video where he was defacing politicians' political hoardings, which itself is a crime here in Auckland. He was doing things like putting stickers on it and like doll parts and some crazy stuff. But the other thing is he was running around with what appeared to be a machete. So that's an escalation. So he's gone from tomato juice to running around with what appears to be a machete, and then he's subsequently been charged with even more serious offences. And what I look at when you see these rainbow extremists who are that they absolutely demand the right to be able to groom children in public libraries, like we've seen over the last 12 hours or so, some pretty threatening type rhetoric coming out of the rainbow community and some of the extremists that are associated with the Green Party. I think, it is concerning that their behavior is escalating amongst the Troon community worldwide. I think it is concerning that their rhetoric, as well as their behavior, is getting ever more violent. We are seeing here, as you've pointed out in this article, that we have got we've got Troons who are part of a cult who are murdering people. And what we've got here in New Zealand, we've got people like the Green Party who firmly believe that any violence on behalf of the transgender community is completely and utterly justified. And what I'm very, very concerned about is that there are going to be people who are even more hurt than the women were that day in Albert Park because of official tolerance for rainbow violence.
Yeah, and the other problem is, and you note the whole rainbow violence that goes on, but notably the people that are responsible for it, the likes of Eeryk, and things like that, is they're also use their platform related to advocating for the trans rights and so forth, to drum up support in the other areas that they like to promote, which is fundamentally to implement communism eventually. Whether it's the People Against Prisons Aotearoa group, which again Eeryk is heavily involved with, or the range of other things. Absolutely, like you even have Te Pāti Māori and like Edu Kapakingi today. I saw in a video he was saying, if you're a masculine man, if you're a straight masculine man, like really a straight masculine man, it was a bit weird to be honest, then you've got to take it upon yourself to come and stand up for the rainbow whānau and not let these Destiny Church fellas do what they're doing and all this sort of stuff. All of it they link together. They link absolutely all of it together to try and drum up support for their causes, and they don't really care how they go about it. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and they fully believe that they are completely justified. Like, if you asked any member of the rainbow community in New Zealand if Posey Parker had been killed at Albert Park, if that would be a bad thing, 99% of the people inside New Zealand's rainbow community and 100% of the trans rights activists and the pedophiles would have said it would be a good thing, because they believe that their cause is so utterly holy that anyone who stands in their way, anyone who says, like Brian Tamaki does, no, it is inappropriate for you to be grooming children, isn't just wrong, they are evil and must be destroyed. It is not someone who is wrong who should be convinced through argument and conversation to change their minds, to reach an accommodation with. They are someone evil who must be destroyed. And we see this in extremist rhetoric from the leftists, from the rainbow community, from some segments of the Maori Party. And it is very, very concerning, because when there is rhetoric like that and it's backed up by incidents of violence, it tends to provoke a reaction. And the problem with a reaction is that it can often be an overreaction. and that ought to be avoided. And my argument is that the police in New Zealand, by siding with rainbow violence, by aiding and abetting rainbow violence, as the police absolutely did at Albert Park, and which the IPCA this week excused them for, what they do is they are encouraging ever more violence. We've gone from tomato juice in this country to machete to assault with a blunt weapon. In Great Britain, we've gone from angry words from this troon in the police on social media to a 3D manufactured automatic weapon. And in the United States, we have an extremist vegan transgender movement running around killing people. I take the view that this sort of activity and the sort of rhetoric that goes along with it is something that the authorities would be wise to stop promoting and look at actually preventing.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you make a very good point about what is it specifically? The left's ability to justify the behavior that you've seen, at Albert Park and the likes, and we can see a prime example of that with the Louis Mangione or whatever, the assassin of that insurance company chief executive. I don't care how utterly revolting the behavior of the insurance company was. I don't care if you sit there and you think that insurance company was destroying people's lives with their decisions about payouts and so forth for people who need the help with their healthcare. The fact that people will sit there and say that CEO deserved to be executed and the person responsible for the execution should not face punishment because they find the person responsible or the chief executive of that insurance company to be morally, reprehensible is crazy to me. It's like saying, let's just go back to the old days where if we believe someone did something bad, we just dealt with them in the public and no trial was necessary. And it's the same of, we should allow people to just do an eye for an eye or take their own personal vigilante justice without consequences because they think that someone is doing others wrong. Frankly, I don't take that. I have a strong belief that we should uphold the law, but seemingly going out of fashion in the West. Upholding the law is only a good idea when the people that you disagree with are the ones being held accountable.
I think that's true. Socialite says in the chat, most of us gay men and lesbian women just want to live our lives quietly. The gender cult is nothing to do with us. Socialite, yeah, I hear that a lot, and, my heart goes out to you in that regard, but, we're just, for the general population, we're not seeing it, right? What we're seeing is all of the rainbow community committed to this path of action. We are not seeing Auckland Pride saying, no, we don't believe the trans community should stop beating up women in public parks. No, we don't believe that paedophiles should be reading to children in public libraries. What we see is the umbrella organizations representing all rainbow people pushing this same ideology, pushing that the intersectionality that you mentioned, and pushing the gender ideology, pushing the absolute demand for indoctrination of children in schools, absolutely everywhere. What I would very strongly suggest to every person who is gay is that they realize that promoting this has gone absolutely too far. For a growing section of the population who supported the gay rights movement back when they thought that the gay rights movement was about consenting adults behind closed doors living their lives as they chose to, they are starting to think maybe maybe our decision to support that was wrong, when what has come along with it is taxpayer-funded articles by the Burnett Foundation about eating feces for sexual gratification. I think that there is going to be a building backlash because of some very, very unsound decision making within the rainbow umbrella groups in regards to those issues. What do you reckon, kid?
Yeah, well, I think that's the problem. Is despite the fact that there may in fact even be a silent majority of the LGB community who are fundamentally opposed to all of this nonsense. I can't sit here and say what the actual numbers are, but regardless of whether it's a minority or a silent majority, the reality is those in the position to put out the message for what the LGB or the pride community believe are pushing something which the majority of people simply can't get on board with. And that's because those who are in charge of the big gay out could not care less if you're a lesbian or a gay person who thinks reading weird books to children whilst dressed like a drag king or queen is inappropriate. They don't care. They're going to push their nonsense, and you're just attached to it, and you can't do anything about it. So I think trying to find a way of detaching yourself effectively and actively pushing back at every opportunity in a public way, so people can see that there really is a difference. That's the only way things are going to change. Otherwise, people will just continue to say, okay, if you are gay, if you are anyone that associates with pride, you're in the same boat. It's just guilt by association until something changes. And whilst the big gay out promotes this nonsense, whilst all of those other big rainbow umbrella organizations promote this nonsense, there is little that you can actually do about it.
You're absolutely right, guys, and I'm having to spray because this mosquito's chasing me around. And so, yeah, you got to watch the Simon TV part of the Eeryk and Simon show. Spray around insect repellent. But you're exactly right about that guilt by association, and it's not just the rainbow community that is going to feel those consequences. We're seeing that the Muslim community around the world, there are Muslim people that are facing the very real possibility where politicians, particularly in Europe, are openly talking about repatriating people who are citizens because they are practitioners of that religion, and the rest of the community is no longer willing to tolerate the potential risk to their community. And these are broad social trends from which no good things can come, right? This is not the way things should be. And when it comes to the rainbow community, I think that they would be wise to police themselves. Speaking of which, I see, isn't it your turn to do an article?
No, this was my article with the Zizian cult. Crazies.
Oh, okay, all right. Oh, it's my turn again. Bugger. Okay, all right. All right. We'll turn to the chat a little bit. Simon Futter says, like the street justice type thing, I think, more hold the law. Yeah, we see this is the thing, Simon Futter. So the troon community, the rainbow community, and the grooming community are talking about they're going to have an event in Albert Park, and I've put out a warning because there's some of the rhetoric in their poster about gays bashing back and things like that is pretty alarming, given that these are people who have a history of violence, right? These are the people who attacked women in Albert Park. And I put out a notice on social media to say to people, look, tell your loved ones, particularly if they're from vulnerable communities like women and children, that Auckland Central is not a safe place to go to this weekend, because there are angry, violent rainbow people with a history of violence who are spouting violent rhetoric, and they are going to be around and about, and their police friends who've just been excused by the IPCA for colluding in rainbow violence, which they absolutely did, that is inarguable, will be there as well to ensure that whatever those rainbow people do to the general public, the police will aid and abet, or at the very best, ignore. So when that happens, it builds resentment amongst the general population. And what ought to be avoided is people taking the law into their own hands. But this is the risk that the police run, and which the IPCA runs by excusing police, bias policing in favour of an extremist minority community, as they are now doing. I personally believe that it should be avoided at all costs. The solution should be peaceful, but we need leadership. We need to see that the culpable officers inside the police are replaced, that the culpable people inside the rainbow community who commit violent crimes are properly punished. What do you reckon, kid?
Yeah, are you expecting anyone that's opposed to them to show up on Sunday in particular to kind of?
I certainly hope not, but Yeah, well, I mean, Sunday is the day of rest, and I'd be very hopeful that people who might oppose their ideology would be using their time more profitably by listening to sermons, going to church, all of that sort of good stuff. It should be a family day. It shouldn't be a day for for opposing points of view. And I think that I'd be very, very surprised if there is any sort of counter demonstration to it. Hopefully what happens is it's just a bunch of bedraggled, scruffy, ugly troons getting together in a park and looking ugly together, which the rest of society can ignore. But if they do kick off, I would expect that there would be a reaction, but I don't believe that it would happen on the day. Long story short, I don't believe that there will be anything coming of it. But don't forget, for the rainbow community and their allies inside the police, they are looking for an excuse to celebrate their victory in the IPCA, looking for an excuse to get stuck in to members of the general public, as they did at Albert Park.
Well, I would just recommend anyone who's going to church on Sunday, just encourage your congregation to pray for rain.
Yes,
So,
yes, yes.
That's
yes.
the best thing you can do there. Just anything that makes them uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, actually, but the other thing is it would be the closest to bathing that some of those people have come in a very long time, I would think. All right, well, look, I've got another article to bring up, which I should get into, and I thought this was pretty funny, turning to international relations. Kid, have you been following what's been happening with, like, J.D. Vance's speech to the Munich Security Conference, and what is happening with the Americans saying, no, we're sick of European warmongering, we don't really want to expand NATO to Russia's front door. We've got to, sort out this meat grinder in Ukraine.
Yeah, I've been doing my best. I've tried. I kind of get my head around the key points that are going on in that kind of and all that sort of stuff at the moment. I do recall seeing quite a few words from JD Vance that I'm sure if they do come up in here will spur my memory up. But yes, I do find the whole thing very interesting, and the whole narrative at the moment that somehow Ukraine has a right to be consulted on what the US does is a little bit interesting.
It will, and we'll get into that in a minute. Well, J.D. Vance's speech was interesting for more concrete reasons, and I loved it. He was talking about, the threat to European people is not Russia. What it is authoritarian governments within the European Union cracking down on things like free speech, and he's exactly right. They are very, very authoritarian in that regard. And he also talked about mass migration being an issue. But look, when it comes to the Ukraine, I find a lot of New Zealanders and Australians are actually relatively uninformed about the fact that this is a war that the world has been fighting for a very, very, very long time. Like every New Zealander, every Australian knows about the Anzacs, right? Knows that we fought there in World War One, and that it was a military disaster that cost a lot of lives. What they don't realise, or what many people don't know, is the reason we were at Anzac Cove, right, fighting on that peninsula at Gallipoli, was to win control of the Dardanelles. Now, the Dardanelles is a very, very thin waterway which runs between the Mediterranean Sea and the Black Sea. Okay, and it is where Sevastopol is, which is the in their time, the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, and now the Russian Federation. It's their only warm water port. It's the only port that doesn't freeze during winter. Now, because the Anzacs failed to secure Gallipoli, the Allies did not manage to control the Dardanelles, and because of that, the Allies could not resupply Russia during World War One, and it led directly to the capitulation of Russia. They were knocked out of the war because the Anzacs failed at Gallipoli, because they didn't have any warm water ports that could accept supplies. But that is not the first time. Many people have heard of the Charge of the Light Brigade. Many people have heard of Florence Nightingale and her wonderful advances in nursing. Few people recall that these things happened in the 1850s at the during the Crimean War, which was a similar thing. It was an attack upon Russia across that warm water port. Now, this is directly relevant to what is happening in Ukraine because it is that area, and that is why it is so strategically important. What I think is absolutely fascinating, and I'll bring up the first article now, is that there is going to be a peace conference, and believe it or not, Ukraine has not been invited. You can imagine what this little dude Zelensky's thoughts are about that. This comes to us from The Telegraph, and it's from Connor Stringer. Trump demands Zelensky holds elections. I've pulled up the wrong article. This was the other part I wanted to talk about, but I'll jump to it now. The proposal raises concerns that Russia will use ballot to oust Ukraine's wartime leader and install pro-Putin candidate. Isn't that funny? Donald Trump is demanding that Zelensky holds elections that could oust him from office as the price of peace. His comments came after Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, and Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, met in Saudi Arabia for the first time on Tuesday to discuss terms to bring an end to the war in Ukraine. After more than 4 hours of talks, it emerged that both sides had agreed elections should be held in Ukraine before a final peace settlement is reached. The critical aspect about this article that I wanted to bring up is the fact that Zelensky has suspended elections in Ukraine, suspended them outright. That guy is not a democratic representative of the Ukrainian people. You will see statistics flying around about him enjoying 60% popularity amongst Ukrainians, that his poll numbers are in the 60s. That is absolute misinformation and disinformation, because for everyone who is Russian speaking, which I think is something like 35 to 40% of the Ukrainian population, he is utterly detested. When they give you a statistics of 60%, it is for a particular ethnic group in the western part of Ukraine. It does not include all of territorial Ukraine. The other interesting aspect about this is it's very interesting to hear anyone American talk about democracy in Ukraine, because back in 2013, 2014, the Americans overthrew the democratically elected government, who happened to be pro-Russian. That is why they did that. You will recall that Russian secret intelligence caught and released a phone conversation between the State Department official Victoria Nuland. She is still running around in diplomatic circles, where she was talking about who they were going to select in the new government after they'd overthrown the present one. The Americans are up to their elbows and doing the dirty in that part of the world, particularly under Obama. And isn't it fascinating, don't you think, Eeryk, that everyone dismisses Trump as a fascist, but he's the first American in about 20 years who's actually done anything to introduce democracy to the Ukrainian people.
It's absurd. I remember when I was first looking into the whole, Maidan revolution, all the nonsense that was going on in 2014, and I was just like, Obama and Biden, you naughty devils. You've absolutely, you fundamentally caused the death of hundreds of thousands of people in the Ukraine, and they will never admit it. They will never be held accountable for it. We sit here, we can demonize Russia till the cows come home. There's plenty of things that you can take issue with Russia for and Putin for, given just the way politics is in that part of the world. It's not Western politics, but that's because we don't put the blinkers on when it comes to how they operate. But when it comes to our own nations, we put the blinkers on and we pretend that we're saints. We pretend that we're not doing anything wrong. We just don't want to admit that we're just as bad as the people that we spend all day criticizing.
That Norm, what's his name, the comedian, the fantastic American comedian, I saw a wonderful quote from him. He was saying, like, one of the jokes he told us, like, I've been reading the history books and it turns out that the good guys won every war. What are the chances? All right, I found the other article that I wanted to bring up. Hang on, let me bring it up here. This comes to us from Al Jazeera. And, you know, people bitch out Al Jazeera, but those guys did me a favor once. And, you know, I'm very, very grateful to them. When I needed some support, they were there for me. I don't know who this comes from, but the article was entitled, Zelensky demands Ukraine involvement after US-Russia talks on war. President Zelensky has renewed a demand that Kiev be included in any talks on how to end Russia's war on Ukraine after the United States and Russia agreed to create a team to negotiate a halt to the fighting. This has a historical precedent with Czechoslovakia. That it is famous about the lead up to World War II that Czechoslovakia was not invited to the Pan-European Conference, which decided the fate of their country, where I think it is at the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia that was ceded to Nazi Germany. I can't recall, but you know, they effectively what they were doing was carving up Czechoslovakia, and they didn't bother to ask the Czechs and the Slovaks to actually participate. And here we have it happening again for Ukraine. I wonder if that would change if Zelensky wasn't president. I wonder if the Americans would at least give the Ukrainians the veneer of respectability of being involved in the discussions about what happens if it was a different president, if it was someone who wasn't so bellicose, who has, you know, a reputation for being a little less than forthright in how he treats other countries' money. The article continues. We want no one to decide anything behind our backs. No decisions can be made without Ukraine on how to end the war in Ukraine, Zelensky told reporters during a visit to Turkey, where he had held talks with President Tayyip Erdogan. He added that he had been due to travel to Saudi Arabia on Wednesday, but has now postponed his trip to Riyadh until March 10th, as he did not want any coincidences. He didn't want to bump into any Americans who were discussing the future of his country. The meeting in Riyadh marked the first time that US and Russian officials have met to discuss ways to halt the fighting that escalated with Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov agreed to appoint respective high-level teams to begin working on a path to ending the conflict in Ukraine as soon as possible. The other thing is that while this is going on, Keir Starmer in Britain is talking about putting British troops, working class British boys on the ground in the Ukraine as at least peacekeepers, if not more, actually fighting against the Russians. Kid, did you see that?
Yeah, I did. I thought, mate, can you read the room for once? Because that's just a ludicrous suggestion. Oh, and then our Prime Minister deciding, oh, here's a suggestion. Maybe we should put some of our defence force in Ukraine for peacekeeping related, roles. I'm just like, shut up. Like, what are these people thinking? I mean, we've just had nearly 3 years of war where tens of thousands, if not many, many more people have died on both sides, and it's clear what needs to happen, but our stupid Western leaders, with the exception of Trump, have decided that the best way forward is to spend a shit ton of money on a lost cause and ultimately just cleanse Ukraine of fighting-age men.
Yeah, and the figures are much worse than that. It's somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million people. Yeah. But Europeans are sick of it. And I follow Thomas Farsi on social media, who's a wonderful journalist who reports on this stuff. It's like, look, this is a meat grinder. The European leaders, the von der Leyens, the Macrons of the world are very, very keen to continue as warmongers and continue this war, and meanwhile people are losing their lives. And this brings me to the next article, because it wasn't just Ukraine who is being sidelined from any peace talks in regard to that conflict. It is also the warmongers inside the European Union. This got picked up by the People's Republic of BBC, probably one of the most biased news agencies in the world. I read them because I like to, I salt mine. I like to read these people pissing their pants. They're reporting on Donald Trump. You could have made a deal. Trump blames Ukraine after US-Russia talks. Donald Trump has taken aim at Ukraine after President Zelensky said it was a surprise his country had not been invited to talks, saying he was disappointed by Ukraine's reaction. He appeared to blame Ukraine for starting the war, saying the country could have made a deal. A full-scale Russian invasion sparked war in Ukraine almost 3 years ago. Bullshit, BBC. What started it was the Obama regime overthrowing the Democratic democratically elected Ukrainian government in 2014. At least. I mean, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but that is certainly the latest flashpoint. Earlier on Tuesday, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov met US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. I've covered that. European NATO states, this is the bit I wanted to read, who remain committed to supporting Ukraine against Russia, have been smarting at being sidelined by Trump's unilateral peace initiative, which reversed the resolutely pro-Ukraine policy of his predecessor as President Joe Biden. They don't like that. Speaking to reporters at his Mar-a-Lago residence, Trump was asked by the BBC what his message was to Ukrainians who might feel betrayed. I hear that they're upset about not having a seat. Well, they've had a seat for 3 years and a long time before that. This could have been settled very easily. I think Trump is right. I see that there is in France, under the auspices of President Macron and at the Elysee Palace, a crisis meeting amongst European leaders that people like von der Leyen is at, that people like Keir Starmer are at. They are talking about going it alone, about fighting a war against Russia in Ukraine without American support. Did you catch that?
I did, and I think they are some of the stupidest people on the face of the planet. And I made note of this because some person who pretends to be a journalist tried to criticize, I think, Mike Hosking for suggesting that, what the US contributes to the whole conflict is basically more than everywhere else combined or whatever. And the numbers to Ukraine specifically are a little bit more mixy. But I made this point. I was like, if the US pulls their support from Ukraine, Ukraine collapses. If any individual European nation pulls their support from Ukraine, it's an inconvenience, but ultimately they can go on. US is everything in this respect. If the US isn't involved, Ukraine is fucked. And that's what Russia knows. That's what the US knows. And the US knows that there is absolutely no way from here for the Ukrainians to win. It's impossible. So it's like, cut your losses, let's end it here. But no, we've got a bunch of nutcases who think that they are making good decisions in Europe, who think, yeah, let's keep fighting. Let's keep fighting. To what end? Until you've sent tens of thousands of your own people over to die? Until you've suddenly found yourself in an actual nuclear war? What's the end game here? It's ludicrous.
It really is. And, a big part of the negotiations around the end of Soviet Union between Ronald Reagan's administration and Mikhail Gorbachev, Edward Shevardnadze, who was the Lavrov before Lavrov. Edward Shevardnadze became president of Georgia, but before that he was Soviet foreign minister. But one of the absolutely cast iron guarantees that was provided to the Soviet Union that became the Russian Federation was that NATO would not move 1 inch eastward. Has happened. What NATO and also economically with the European Union they've done is they've been then creating a lot of issues in Tbilisi in Georgia around accepting the results of an election. You've got NATO involvement and all of that, and it's what you're seeing in Ukraine. And the problem is that they're constantly poking the Russian bear in this regard, and it does risk conflict, as you rightly say. But I also think that you're absolutely bang on the button, kid. To what fucking purpose? Like, why do this at all? Why not just let countries make their own decisions through democratic processes, rather than Keir Starmer in Great Britain saying, I don't really care what the Ukrainian people want. It's in my interest for NATO to expand eastward, so fuck it. I'm putting British troops, British young guys on the ground, boots and all, to sacrifice their lives for my political objectives.
Yeah, but that's the other thing there. It's like for his own interests, not the interests of the people he represents. And that's a fundamental problem in Western nations right now, is far too many of the leaders couldn't care less what the actual people want. They care about advancing their own political careers, agendas, and endgame goals for their own life.
Yep. I tell you what, the world will be a better place when all of us retards take over, I've got to tell you. Okay, well, look, guys, we're out of time. We've been going for 2 hours. Kid, it's always awesome to spend a Wednesday evening chatting away to you and with the people in the audience. Do you have any comments from your people you want to address?
Oh no, I've had recidivist child amuser just being a recidivist commenter, which is extremely useful. And he's raised a range of things that are kind of a bit I feel to me personally needs a little bit more elaboration for me to actually give something back. But I do appreciate it. They're in the back of my head, and I appreciate their contribution. I think there is one that I probably can very quickly touch on, and that is that Russia gets Eastern Ukraine. I think at this point, Russia will get Eastern Ukraine, and to be fair, it hasn't been under Eastern Ukraine control or actual Ukrainian control for at least 2.5 years. So that's a done deal. But I must say.
You're right. There is going to be some territorial compromise, but that's not the worst thing in the world, right? Like when the Americans overthrew the government back in 2014, one of the first things that the incoming government did was ban the use of the Russian language. Right, and that's 40% of the people, and that is just absolutely unconscionable. And it would be given the demographics of Ukraine, that there is Russian speaking people predominantly in the east around the Donbass, and those sorts of areas. Maybe that is not the worst outcome. And I appreciate that territorial integrity is important for countries, but in the interests of long-term peace, I think that giving up some territory to achieve it is worth the cost.
Yeah, and you can go back to rebuilding your families for one, not just the parts of the Ukrainian nation that's still there, that's been damaged, but the families, because what we've had, as you've said, hundreds of thousands of people die in what is ultimately a hopeless war that has only, all it's actually done is just cut off how far west the Russians have been able to push, but it's still a little bit of up in the air as to whether or not the Russians ever intended to take over the entirety of Ukraine anyway. So whether or not they achieved the actual goal, which was those specific oblasts that they have control over, well, we're in that position. But I do want to say I've had an extremely good evening, and of course, having that evening and this dialogue with you, Simon, has been great as always. But specifically on the number of people who have tuned in tonight on my end, usually it's probably half of what we've had tonight. So I've had nearly 500 over on X, nearly 100 over on YouTube. Absolutely great numbers. I very much appreciate it. It's great to see that people have noticed that we're having a regular time and they're deciding to tune in and even participate, as we've had quite a bit of this evening. So thank you all very much for that.
Yeah, well, and certainly more people are tuned into you on X than there are to me. I see at the moment, looks to me like there's 463 people watching on Eeryk's channels, and there's 372 on mine. And on YouTube, which is where other people tend to watch, I see there's 337 people over there as well. And I've got a few more, there's about 60 or 70 people on Substack and scattered around all the others. Hey, and for anyone who was watching on live.simontv.org, please do let me know how the broadcast came through, because I'm still tuning that server. All right, look, I'm going to let the kid take us out. So this is the final word from me. I'll say good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for the pleasure of your company. It's always nice to spend a Wednesday evening with the kid and with all of you. I will be back on Sunday night for my regular Simon TV nonsense at 8:30 on Sunday. I hope you'll join me then.
Sweet. And from me, everyone, thank you once again for tuning in, participating, and just having a good time. Maybe you're just having a drink, having some food. Don't really mind, as long as you tuned in, enjoyed yourself. That's what matters. As for me, I will 100% be doing a live stream on my own sometime between now and next Wednesday. Very likely a test run for my upcoming return of the Eeryk McRae show, which, like tonight, which was we're going out to Helsinki in Finland on their radio station over there somewhere. I will, of course, have the Eeryk McRae show on radio here in New Zealand when that is fully up and running. So that's an exciting thing as well. So yeah, thank you all once again, as well as anyone in Finland who tuned in and didn't understand a word that we were saying, because even if you understand English, you ain't understanding this English. So yeah, thank you all very much. Do take the time to come and tune in again next week, because we'll be back at the same time, I suspect. So have a great week. I certainly will have one. Stay away from Auckland Central on the weekend and just enjoy life. Lovely. Cheers.
Bye, everyone.
Just enjoy life. Lovely. Cheers.
Bye.